I spent most of my life wondering whether my parents actually disliked me or if they simply loved my younger sister so much that there was nothing left for anyone else. If my sister wanted a new car, she got one. If she wanted a vacation, my parents somehow found the money. If she wanted to start another ridiculous business, everyone treated her like the next great entrepreneur. Unfortunately, her business ideas usually had the life expectancy of a fruit fly. At 23, she started a luxury dog yoga company. At 24, she launched a subscription service that mailed motivational potatoes to customers. At 25, she attempted to sell scented candles inspired by famous historical disasters. Every venture collapsed within weeks. Yet somehow I was always the disappointment. Meanwhile, I worked 18-hour days building a technology company from a tiny apartment with second-hand furniture and a laptop that overheated whenever I opened more than 3 tabs. While my sister was collecting excuses, I was collecting businesses. 1 company became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became an investment portfolio worth more money than my parents could imagine. The funny part? They had absolutely no idea. I never told them. Every time they asked about my life, they were usually looking for money anyway. The less they knew, the safer my bank account remained. My favorite person in the universe found the whole situation hilarious. My boyfriend grew up on one of humanity's off-world colonies, and he viewed my family the way scientists might study an endangered species. With caution. And binoculars. The first time he met my parents, he lasted exactly 15 minutes before whispering into my ear, "I think your sister could accidentally lose a game of solitaire." I nearly choked on my drink. He wasn't wrong. His sarcasm became one of the reasons I fell in love with him. Whenever my family created a new disaster, he turned it into comedy. When my sister lost $50,000 trying to market designer pet socks, he sent me a bouquet of flowers with a note that read, "My condolences to the sock industry." That particular note stayed framed in my office. Unfortunately, my parents never changed. A few months before everything happened, they demanded that I fund my sister's newest project. This time she wanted to open a luxury dating service that matched rich people with other rich people. She didn't have any customers. She didn't have a business plan. She didn't even have an office. What she did have was confidence completely unsupported by reality. I politely declined. My parents reacted as though I had committed a crime. For weeks they called me selfish, ungrateful, heartless. The irony was almost impressive. The final argument happened on a rainy evening. My mother spent 20 minutes explaining why I owed my sister financial support. My father informed me that family should always help family. Coming from people who hadn't helped me in years, the speech felt especially ridiculous. When I refused again, everyone started yelling. My sister claimed I was jealous of her potential. That statement alone nearly made me laugh myself unconscious. Eventually I grabbed my keys and left before I said something I might enjoy too much. I remember driving through the rain. I remember my phone vibrating with another incoming call from my parents. I remember rejecting it. Then I remember headlights. A horn. Metal screaming. The world spinning. And suddenly everything went dark. The last thought I had before unconsciousness swallowed me was that my boyfriend was going to make an incredibly inappropriate joke about this. Knowing him, he'd probably say something like, "You really went all out to avoid another family meeting." Then the darkness took everything. The first thing I became aware of was sound. A steady electronic beeping echoed somewhere nearby. Then came voices. At first they were distant and distorted, like people speaking underwater. Gradually they became clearer. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move a finger. I couldn't even tell whether it was day or night. But I could hear. And unfortunately, the first people I heard were my parents. A doctor was explaining my condition. "There is significant trauma, but we're monitoring her closely. The next 24 to 48 hours will be important." The doctor sounded calm, professional, hopeful. My mother sounded annoyed. "How much is all this costing?" There was a brief silence. Even the doctor seemed surprised. I beg your pardon? The machines. The room. The treatment. How expensive is it? I wanted to believe I was dreaming. I wasn't. My father sighed dramatically. If she's not going to wake up, we need to be realistic. Realistic. Apparently that was the new word for abandoning your daughter. The doctor explained that there was still a possibility of recovery. My mother immediately asked another question. What happens to her assets if she dies? The doctor actually cleared his throat awkwardly. I think that's a matter for attorneys, not physicians. I couldn't see his face, but I imagined him mentally updating his opinion of my family. Then my sister arrived. And somehow things became worse. Oh good, she said cheerfully. Have they said anything about her apartment yet? My apartment. Not my condition. Not my health. My apartment. I wanted to wake up purely so I could throw something at her. Instead, I remained trapped in silence. For the next hour they discussed my possessions like shoppers browsing a department store. My sister wanted my penthouse. My mother wanted my jewelry. My father wanted my investment accounts. The most ridiculous argument started over my sports car. My sister claimed she deserved it because she was emotionally affected. My father argued that he should get it because he was older. The discussion lasted nearly 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I was technically still alive while they held a family draft for my belongings. Then came the moment I would never forget. The doctor returned with additional information. Again he emphasized patience. Again he mentioned possible recovery. My father interrupted him. Look, doctor, if the odds aren't great, let her go. The room became quiet. Even the machine seemed louder. My mother nodded. We don't want resources wasted unnecessarily. Resources? That was apparently what I had become. Not a daughter. Not a person. A resource allocation problem. Inside my mind something snapped. Oddly enough, I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even surprised. Mostly I was angry that they'd finally said out loud what they'd been showing me for years. My sister immediately started planning what she would do with her inheritance. She wanted vacations. Designer clothes. A luxury yacht. A luxury yacht. The woman couldn't successfully manage a checking account, yet she was shopping for boats. Then fate finally decided I'd suffered enough. A familiar voice entered the room. My boyfriend. The love of my life. The only person in the world capable of turning a disaster into a comedy routine. One glance at the atmosphere must have told him everything. Interesting, he said calmly. What? Most families visit hospitals hoping someone survives. This appears to be a very innovative approach. Nobody answered. He pulled a chair beside my bed. I felt his hand gently wrap around mine. I'll stay. Hours passed. He never left. Meanwhile, my family continued discussing inheritance plans. At one point, my boyfriend quietly muttered, I've seen scavenger hunts with more dignity. I would have laughed if my body had cooperated. Then, late that evening, I heard another conversation outside my room. Hospital executives. Board members. Lawyers. Urgent voices discussing an emergency meeting. The words made little sense at first. But one thing became very clear. The people running this hospital had just discovered something important. Something my parents didn't know. Something my sister definitely didn't know. The same hospital where they had casually suggested ending my treatment belonged largely to me. And very soon, everyone was going to find out. 24 hours later, the universe decided it had heard enough nonsense. The first thing I felt was a sharp ache behind my eyes. The second thing I felt was my boyfriend squeezing my hand so tightly that I wondered if he was trying to confirm I was real. My eyelids fluttered open. Bright hospital lights greeted me. For a moment nobody moved. A nurse standing nearby froze completely. The clipboard slipped from her hands and crashed onto the floor. My boyfriend stared at me. I stared back. Then he jumped out of his chair so fast that it tipped over. Well, he said, blinking repeatedly. This is awkward. I managed a weak smile. Why? Because I spent the last 24 hours preparing an inspirational speech, and now I don't get to use it. The nurse finally recovered enough to sprint out of the room. Seconds later, the hallway erupted into chaos. Doctors rushed inside. Machines beeped. Questions flew from every direction. Meanwhile, I sat there wondering whether I could sue my family for emotional damage and stupidity at the same time. Within an hour, the entire executive board of the hospital had arrived. That was when things became truly entertaining. My parents entered shortly afterward. Apparently, they had been contacted about my miraculous recovery. The expressions on their faces were priceless. Not relieved. Not emotional. Not grateful. Terrified. My sister looked as though she'd seen a ghost. Considering she had already spent my imaginary inheritance several times, I understood her concern. My mother forced a smile. "Oh, sweetheart, you're awake." I looked directly at her. Disappointed? The room instantly became uncomfortable. My boyfriend coughed suspiciously. It sounded remarkably similar to laughter. My father attempted damage control. "We were so worried about you." "Interesting," I replied. "Because I distinctly remember someone recommending I be unplugged." Silence. Beautiful, glorious silence. Then the chairman of the hospital board cleared his throat. The poor man looked as if he had been waiting all morning for this moment. "There is also another matter that requires discussion." My parents glanced at him nervously. The chairman continued. "Miss, as majority shareholder, we need your approval regarding several emergency decisions." My mother's smile disappeared. My father blinked. My sister looked confused. "Majority what?" she asked. The chairman looked genuinely surprised. "They didn't know?" "No," I said. "They definitely did not." The next 30 seconds were some of the most satisfying of my life. The board chairman calmly explained that through multiple investment companies, trusts, and acquisitions, I owned controlling interests in several healthcare organizations, including this hospital. My sister's mouth literally fell open. My father looked like his soul had left his body. My mother grabbed a chair before she collapsed. Meanwhile, my boyfriend sat quietly enjoying the show. I could practically see him rating everyone's reactions. 5 stars for panic. 10 stars for regret. Then came the second surprise. The board's legal department had already begun reviewing financial records connected to my family. Apparently, years of suspicious spending had attracted attention. The findings were fascinating. My parents had accumulated enormous debts expecting future support from me. My sister had used my name to secure various loans and business agreements. One of her failed companies still owed 6 figures. The legal team presented folders. Lots of folders. My boyfriend stared at the stack. "That's never a good sign," he observed. I couldn't argue. I opened the first file. Then the second. Then the third. Every page revealed a new disaster. At some point I stopped feeling angry and started feeling impressed. Creating this much financial chaos required dedication. Finally, I looked at the legal team. "Freeze everything." My mother's face turned white. "Everything?" "Everything." The attorneys immediately went to work. Accounts frozen. Access revoked. Properties reviewed. Pending investigations launched. By lunchtime, my family's financial empire of bad decisions had begun collapsing like a row of dominoes. My sister's phone started ringing nonstop. Banks. Creditors. Lawyers. One call after another. My boyfriend watched her panic and whispered to me, "I think we're witnessing a rare species entering extinction." I nearly laughed hard enough to reopen my stitches. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted. And this was only the beginning. Because my family had made one very expensive mistake. They thought I was powerless. Now they were about to learn exactly how wrong they had been. Over the following months, my recovery progressed faster than anyone expected. My family's recovery, however, was an entirely different story. Every week seemed to bring a fresh disaster. The investigations uncovered years of irresponsible spending, questionable loans, and financial decisions that appeared to have been designed by people actively competing against common sense. Credit lines vanished. Accounts remained frozen. Several luxury purchases were repossessed. The sports car my sister had already claimed as part of her imaginary inheritance disappeared from her vision board. She was devastated. I was not. For the first time in my life, consequences had finally caught up with her. My parents tried everything. They called. They emailed. They sent handwritten letters describing themselves as victims. One letter actually blamed my accident for their financial problems. That required a level of creativity I had never seen before. Then they attempted a public apology. Unfortunately for them, it became one of the funniest disasters of the year. A local reporter asked why they had told doctors to stop treatment. My father responded by saying his words had been taken out of context. The reporter then played the recording. There was no context in the universe that could save him. The clip went viral. Within days, millions of people had watched the interview. Internet comedians had enough material to survive for years. My boyfriend laughed so hard he nearly spilled coffee on his tablet. I don't think I've ever seen someone lose an argument to their own voice recording. He wasn't wrong. Meanwhile, I focused on moving forward. The hospital expanded several patient assistance programs. New scholarships were created. Research funding increased. I wanted something good to come from the experience. And surprisingly, it did. People who had once felt ignored finally received opportunities. Employees became more engaged. Communities benefited. For the first time since the accident, I felt genuinely at peace. Then my boyfriend decided to completely ruin my ability to remain emotionally composed. Several months later, he organized a charity gala celebrating patient recovery and medical innovation. Hundreds of guests attended. Executives, doctors, nurses, investors, and community leaders filled the ballroom. Halfway through the evening, he stepped onto the stage. I immediately became suspicious. That expression on his face usually meant trouble. The microphone squealed softly as he smiled at the crowd. Most of you know this incredible woman survived a situation that should have broken her. The room applauded. He looked toward me. She's stronger than anyone I've ever met. Smarter than anyone I've ever met. And significantly more patient than I would have been. Laughter spread through the audience. Then he reached into his pocket. The entire room gasped. Even I stopped breathing for a second. He walked toward me and dropped to one knee. I promise to support you through every challenge. The audience watched silently. I promise to make you laugh whenever life gets difficult. A few people wiped tears from their eyes. Then he added, and I promise never to unplug your life support during an argument. The entire ballroom exploded with laughter. Even I couldn't stop laughing. Trust him to turn a proposal into a comedy routine. When the laughter settled, he held out the ring. So what do you think? I smiled through tears. Yes. The applause felt endless. For the first time in years, my future looked brighter than my past. A year later, we were planning business expansions across multiple planetary colonies while building a life together. As for my family, they eventually faded into the background. My sister attempted one final business venture. She launched an online service that claimed to teach entrepreneurship. The company lasted 6 days. Apparently, customers wanted instructors who had actually succeeded at something. The news report about its collapse appeared on my living room screen one evening. My fiancé glanced at it and shook his head. That's almost impressive. I laughed and rested my head on his shoulder. The funny thing is that my parents had spent years believing I needed them. They thought I would always be the overlooked daughter desperate for approval. Instead, I built an empire. I survived betrayal. I found real love. And the people who told the doctor to let me go ended up watching me thrive without them. In the end, the greatest investment I ever made wasn't a company or a hospital. It was believing in myself when nobody else did. And that turned out to be worth everything.